Hello, everyone. Thank you for sticking around in the afternoon. I'm following JJ and I'm following lunch, and I know it's nap time, and I know it's gloomy outside, and I'm having said that, let's just jump right in. I told Emma I'm perfectly capable of introducing myself. My name's Tamara Potter. I work here at KSU. I'm a bee extension specialist. I'm not talking about honeybees in particular with this talk. Having said that, though, I do coordinate the beginner beekeeping grant, and I have some information about that if you so choose to pick up one of these flyers. There is my phone number on here. There's also my email if you're interested in that. We also have other grants for people who may be sideline farmers who want to do value added. JJ kept talking about elderberries. That's been a hot topic with our group. So there's some other types of grants. There's a farmer education grant that I wish everybody would start at instead of trying to do beekeeping first. You know, I wish that they would start with some type of education. So just know that there's quite a few grants, but I'm not talking about grants today. I say that. I also I'm in the process of decluttering, so I have some bee journals. You are welcome to take these with you. I have read them. It's time for them to find a new home. Feel free to take them all. Just thought that they may, you may want some reading material later in the day. So, been a beekeeper since 1997. I would say I helped a beekeeper, or I didn't really become a beekeeper on my own until I would say more like the mid-2000s. But this number, every colony needs 252 million flowers to get through a full calendar year. That's important, because you need those flowers blooming early spring, early summer, late summer, early fall, late fall. And any time you have a drought, that impacts your nectar and your pollen production. So if you're going to have pollinators and beekeeping in particular, you need to have a lot of diversity of plants, because you never know how a drought could impact one species perhaps more adversely than another. So you want lots of diversity. I've been in Idaho before and seen 1,000 acres of star thistle. Now, star thistle is a vile plant, but it makes an exquisite nectar. But every single plant that year, it was 2008, was what we call in our industry a dry bloom. There wasn't a single drought of nectar, and that beekeeper was having to move his bees, right, so he could find plants that had nectar. So this governs when my husband and I are choosing sites. This governs where we're putting our hives, right? What does it look like? What types of diversity of flowers do we have? And it always worries me when somebody shows up and they want to save their bees, and I know that they are earnest in their effort, but they haven't thought about the flowering species and the place that they want to keep their bees. In fact, when a school calls me, inevitably it'll be a school and they want to have hives, I now ask for three things, right? What, first of all, is their budget? Where are they going to put their hives? And what kinds of flowers do they have? Right? Who is going to take care of those bees in the middle of the summer when most school teachers have off, right? Inevitably, they don't call back, right? I mean, that's a very short conversation, right? And I want it that way, right? Because I'm the advocate for the bees here. I'm not the advocate for a public school, and necessarily. We don't need more bad beekeepers, period. And what these bees need from all of these flowers are the top two pollens. Pollen is an incredibly important See, I compare this to a shopping list, right? Whenever we go to Kroger's, we're trying to pick up protein, and the pollen is the bee's protein. And it governs a lot of the biology rhythms of a hive, right? When enough pollen starts coming in, and as the days get longer, those pollens trigger a queen bee to start laying eggs, right? And like I said, it's a protein. So if you don't have enough pollen going into those hives, then your hives can get sick. Their immune systems can go down. They can decline. Nectar, that's the fuel that flowers produce to lure bees. Very difficult for flowers to produce pollens. In fact, you'll have some plants that only produce a grain or two of pollen, right? Sourwood is notorious for this. But it is easy for flowering plants, comparatively speaking, to produce nectar. Right? Very easy for flowers to throw off nectar. And like I said, it's the lure. And those bees need nectar. It's the carbohydrates that give them the energy. And through every year, right, a typical movable frame hive needs approximately 120 pounds of honey. 60 to get through the spring and summer, and 60 to get through the fall and the winter. These other two won't be talking about as much, but just so that you know, bees also need water. It's essential for thermoregulation of the winter cluster right now. Some nectars have a tendency, or honeys, shall we say, to crystallize very quickly. So water helps pollinators reliquefy crystallized honey so that they can take it down. And then bees are also gathering propolis, you know, that sticky substance that you find on the outside of conifers when you're bringing in your Christmas trees, right? Bees use that, right? They create what we call an antibacterial envelope inside their house. It's a protective coating. Like we have insulation, they have those rosins, and it forms what we call propolis. But that's a little specialized for this particular group. Nonetheless, what I'd like for you to walk away from is realizing that when we think of a flower, it's not just pretty petals, okay? I mean, it's a complex system of using petal structure to lure bees to it, and they're producing products such as nectar and pollen that not only help the flower ensure its DNA codes get transferred to other flowers, but also that the bees get their own immune system protected and they get their protein needs. And pollen is a big one, right? It's, like I said, it's very complex, and you will see that I've included little pollen grains. The more dependent a flower seems to be on pollinators, the more architecturally interesting the pollen grain seems to be. They'll have spikes so that they can adhere to the body of the bee, for instance, right? Or divots, furrows, things that let the pollen grain hold to the legs of a bee. Whereas if it's wind pollinated, it'll be just completely round, right? Because the wind can carry those things anywhere. If you're crazy about this stuff, if you're a nerd like I am, there's a QR code up here that talks about some of the latest research happening with pollen grains, and it's also available on audio, so you can listen to one of our USDA researchers talk about this. And then here is one of my bees. You can see these pollen grains adhering to the bee, even though, well, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Even, you know, you can see her legs, right? The pollen basket's on her legs. Let me try. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, so when the bee is flying through the air, right, she's producing very tiny electromagnetic shocks, so she's able to kind of not consciously collecting pollen grains. It's just happening as she's flying. But then there are flowers where she is consciously collecting the pollen grains, and you see those in her pollen baskets on these very hind legs, right? And And they're fascinating. Pollen grains have evolved to handle anything, right? I mean, these are tiny microscopic DNA envelopes. And so they have 2 shells. These can withstand chemical warfare, right? Because they have to, right? I mean, our world is constant chemical warfare. So they have an exine that has that surface ornamentation that you'll see in the following slides. But then the inside of the pollen grain is built of carbohydrates. And I like to quote Josh Bartlett. He calls the intine the diamond of the plant world, right? That is going to protect the DNA, the genetic material inside those flowers and help it be transferred to another flower if needed be. And so flowers evolve these, like I said, strategic maneuvers to lure pollinators to them. Sometimes it's color, sometimes it's petal structure, sometimes it's volatile odors. We smell, for instance, certain flowers when they bloom. They'll have different coloration. And the reason why is that the flower is ensuring that it gets its DNA exactly to where it needs to be, right? So it's like, okay, if you are waiting for a Greyhound bus, by golly, you could be on that bus for 48 hours before you get where you want to be. But if you're a flower, you can make it into an Uber driver. It may be more expensive, but it'll make sure that you get to where you want to be and quickly, right? More quickly. So that's the benefit of flower strategies and pollination. And when bees bring back those pollens that we looked at, they turn those into a product that we in the industry call bee bread. Bees cannot just sit on a flower and consume pollen. Their digestive systems don't work that way. Bumblebees do, but not honeybees. They have to bring it back and process it, and that's what you're seeing here, is pollen grains have been brought back. They get mixed in with lipids and phenols and other sterols and things like that, and then that produces a substance called bee bread. Bees and humans are very similar in that we have to process our foods, right? We can't just eat a cow whole, right? We have to butcher it. We have to, we have many different ways of processing beef, but we have to process it, right? We cannot just, and bees are the same way when it comes to pollen. Like I said, pollen is the trigger for the queen. You get enough of those pollen grains coming in when it gets warm in February. We get longer days. We get more flowers blooming. And the queen says, okay, we're going to have enough food. I can start laying my eggs here. And just like right now, we're in November. We have super short days, not much sunlight. The flowers have quit producing pollen. She's quit laying eggs right now. The winter cluster has formed. It looks a lot like we are right now. We're close. We're keeping warm. And the activity goes down until February in this state. These nectar guides, we're talking about these strategies that these flowers produce. The yellow here is what we see, right? And the white is kind of, it blends in with the yellow. It's not quite so visible. But bees have a separate type of vision with their multifaceted compound eyes. And so under a bee's eyes, that's what the flower looks like. And you can tell it's directing the bee exactly to where the nectaries and the pollen grains are. So they're advertising. I like to show these slides because I think sometimes when we talk about nectaries, all humans can really think about is honey, right? But plants are very different, and nectaries can be very different. And so partridge pea is unusual in that the nectary is on the stem, in addition to being in the blossom, in the flower blossom too. But this was, T.C. Davis has given me permission to use this. And I like for gardeners in particular to see this, because you don't want to just go out willy-nilly and apply your products to keep insects away. And here's why, right? When that nectary starts exuding nectar, you may not know when it's doing that. So you want to wait until later in the evening after the pollinators have gone back home so that you're not impacting their honey, for instance. And then this is what that nectar looks like when it gets brought back into the hive. Anything here that you see glistening is nectar, which is 80% water, right? As the bees cause that water to evaporate, that moisture level will come down to 17%, and they will cap it over at that point with wax. And that's when you and I have what we call honey, and it's safe for us to eat at that point in time. So I'm just going to piggyback on what several people have already said today about the importance of soil sampling, because I'm supposed to talk about pollinator habitat, and you're going to waste your time if you don't know what your soil has. And to not just take one sample, but take quite a bit. Now, there may be some folks from UK here who can answer me this. Earlier in the year, UK Cooperative Extension agents were offering free soil samples. They had free bags for you to take, and you want to take several soil samples. And you want those soil samples to be clean. Like, you don't want to take a shovel that you've just dug a bunch of manure in and then turn around and get soil with that same shovel. You want to use your gloves, disposable gloves, things like that. But is that free still? Or do you know? Am I putting you on the spot? Well, and even if it's not, we're talking $15 maybe, and not super expensive. And this is not necessarily the same as the heavy metals soil sampling, but this will give you a sense of what you have. So start first with a soil sample. Start with several. With the people I tend to work with, we tend to start with herbicide spraying at the beginning of August because it's cheaper and it's easy to apply and it tends to be very effective. And then we call that our first kill because we're trying to get those invasive grasses dealt with. And then what's underneath that seed bank is going to have a chance to come up. And we don't want that either, because that's going to be Johnson grasses or woody invasives. So then we'll do our second kill right before the first killing frost. So in this area, that tends to be around October 15th. We've had snow October 18th one year. It can vary, but we try to get that second kill, that herbicide kill in before the first frost, and then we'll follow up with a third application next spring. And unfortunately, people hate this burnt look, but to me, if you're in an area, I've worked with some distilleries before, this is your only option, right? You cannot do prescribed fire burns in distilleries. But my preferred method is a prescribed fire burn. This is on my family farm. That's my dad out there with a drip line torch. You want to do a couple of things with a prescribed fire burn. You want to have what we call a burn break. Here we have several. We have a road, right, that's going to stop a prescribed fire burn. We have cool season grasses, and we have a pond, right? Work with your local NRCS agent on that if you don't have these things in place. Make sure to get a burn permit before you engage in this. But I like prescribed fire burns because they're quick, super easy. It's just cheap. Because once you get your fire burns in place, your fire breaks, you're fine, right? You're ready to go. But you also want to work with your local fire department, make sure they keep them in the loop, and that you have your hoses and fire extinguishers handy if you need this. And then the year that we did that particular burn, prescribed fire burn, this was one of our CRP fields. CRP is short for Conservation Reserve Practice. It's a government grant, a federal government grant, and they pick up half the cost of the seed, and we pick up the other half. This seed is expensive. All right, the invoice for 14 acres was $15,000. It was about $1,000 an acre, okay? Well worth it. Well worth every penny. In 2018, we didn't have a single drop of rain in the part of Fayette County that I was from. But the New England asters, which came out in September, carried our bees. They had nectar. I didn't have to feed. It worked, and it continues to pay for itself. But you do have to maintain these things. You will always fight woody invasives. You will always fight Johnson grass, right? You never get to just walk away from these different places. You may have a couple of years where you can walk away, but you inevitably will have to come right back. And so these next couple of slides are different species that I like to just kind of put on people's radar screens. Willows are just fabulous for all pollinators, but honeybees in particular. But you have to have two of them, right? You have to have a male and a female. You can tell the difference when they are in bloom because the male pollen is going to be much more brilliantly yellow than the female. But you do need to have two, okay? A male and a female to get the best out of this. But this is what I mean about the architecture of a pollen grain. Now, willows are one of these species. They play both sides of the fence, right? Because they're blooming in mid-January. Here in Kentucky, it can be 70 degrees, and then turn around, and it can be 7 degrees, right? So they don't put all of their eggs in one basket, right? They can be pollinated by pollinators, or they can be pollinated by the wind, right? It's a very unusual strategy, right? But we do have quite a few different types of plants like that. I like to mention skunk cabbage, first of all, because I think it's a fabulous plant, but then it also has this unique property. We call it thermogenesis. It can generate heat. So sometimes if you're lucky, you will see a bee warming its wings right as it gets ready to leave to go back to its hive, right, or its log or its tree or wherever its home is, right? It can produce heat in the middle of February, which is, like I said, very unusual. I like to highlight my colleague, Dr. Claire Richoff at the University of Kentucky, because we provided the bees for her to do a research study on annuals here in the bluegrass. And we had our hives all over the place. She had 19 different hives, and what she was finding was that there was a lot of diversity of annuals. Everybody talks about perennials because we all have this lovely idea in our head that if we plant perennials, then we don't have to do any more work. What her point is with these annuals is that they do bloom at a critical time of the year when other things may not, depending upon our winter. And like I said, she did this color chart to show 19 different apiaries that we set up and all of the diversity that we're having. And I think I put the link in the previous slide, so you're welcome to access that. But then after those annuals after their bloom ends, we get into orchard bloom and the king bloom. And this is from my grandfather's farm, which I guess because spotted lanternfly is making its way into northern Kentucky, I guess I'm just going to have to emotionally divorce myself from the apples. But I'll have a love-hate relationship with clover. My grandfather's farm is in Fayette County, and I'm surrounded by horse farms, so I produce clover honey, right? But I like to emphasize that we also have a native type of clover called running buffalo clover. It's more prevalent than what we thought it was, and it really likes disturbance, the kind of disturbance that we associate with buffalo tramping on the ground. And the idea was that the seeds would get embedded in the fur of the buffalo as it would follow the buffalo traces. So I like to remind people that we do, in fact, have a native clover, that this may be something that they want to try to propagate. And what we worry about is that these other types of clovers that we have brought over from Europe can outcompete running buffalo clover, that's why it's endangered. It just cannot compete with something, something like white clover. If you are trying to climate proof your gardens, Coreopsis is your friend. I don't care what kind of Coreopsis. It can handle drought. It can handle adverse conditions. And what I like, Craig Burrows had modified a camera so that we can see flowers the way bees see flowers. And so he gave me permission to use these slides from his book. But this is a picture of Plains Coreopsis showing us where pollen grains are on the flower. So the way that a bee would see that. And then Kentucky Department of Transportation uses Mexican sunflowers in a lot of their highway rights-of-ways, right? So again, those of you who are wanting to add some certain species to, like, maybe some bare parts of your yard or difficult parts of your yard to plant things, Mexican sunflower may be your friend. And I like to mention devil's walking stick because it blooms at an unusual time of year. It's more of a shrub. It's more of what I call a fringe tree on the forest. I tend to see them when I'm going up I-65, I-75, on the edges of the Daniel Boone National Forest. You will see every pollinator in the whole area working these things. But they have, and I'm quoting from a source here, a vicious thorn. You do not just want to reach out and grab these things. They will impale you. They are not. Of course, it's the plant's strategy to keep from being eaten by deer, but it is a vicious thorn. But it's a fabulous nectar source. And so I've got a little QR code here from Dr. Doug Sponsler, who did some work. I had always thought of this as a forest tree. He talked about how well it does in Philadelphia, in the middle of an urban environment, which I did not know this. So I threw that in there just in case some of you want to try something different. And then, of course, I mentioned this photo was taken in 2018. That year, we did not have a single drop of rain on the farm. This is New England aster, right? For that $15,000 flower seed invoice that we paid in 2015, every penny it was repaid back in this year. And I did not have to feed. I didn't have to do anything. And what I really like about this is that the structure of asters it looks positively medieval. You've got these spikes and these divots. It absolutely depends upon pollinators to take its pollen from one flower to the other. I think the pollen structures are just gorgeous. I like to mention goldenrod, but what I see too often with goldenrod is that people have a perception that they need to till the soil super deeply, right? And if you do that with goldenrod, first of all, you're wasting your time, right? Goldenrod does not need to be planted super deeply, right? You can almost hand sow it, and it would do all right. It just needs a very fine layer of soil on it. But I see people, if you spend that much money on wildflower seed. You want to make sure that you work with your NRCS people. A lot of times they will set the seed drill for you so that you don't make those expensive mistakes. So make sure that you work with that. Now, I have a note here. Just like there's running buffalo clover that's native to Kentucky, there is a native goldenrod in Kentucky, and it's also considered endangered. But I mention it because if you can get Short's goldenrod established, it can handle drought. It can handle drought really well. And I think it's important to kind of call out these different species that can help people kind of climate-proof their gardens, okay? So that you're not out there with your little watering spout every single day, right? I mean, Short's goldenrod, it's endangered, but there have been 50-year-old stands of it in northeastern Kentucky. You can find them. And you can almost pretty much gather goldenrod seed by hand, right? I mean, it's a hardy, it can handle that. So I'm closing my talk on pollinator habitat by hoping that what you're getting from this message is that flowers aren't static. I mean, it's our perception that they're rooted and that maybe they're static, but they are changing and they are reacting. And they are changing their flower patterns, colors sometimes. They're changing their bloom times. We know that, Dr. Pomper said in his particular presentation that he is noticing that some of his pawpaws are blooming 2 weeks earlier than they had when he first started the research on them. This is happening with other flower species too. Right? We are in the middle of a vast scientific experiment of our own creation. We have no idea what's coming down the pike. None. And so for people, I mean, we had 300 beehives, right? And we're having to think about, okay, where do we have our hives so that they can have access to those 252 million flowers that they need to get through the full year. Otherwise, we're moving our bees, right? Which we really don't want to do. So that's just, something to consider. The quality sometimes can change with areas that are under intense environmental pressures. It won't be as good quality. Dry blooms, reliable blooms. I was talking about Idaho and star thistle in 2008. That's becoming more normal, I think. All of these are having an impact on our pollinators. So I was going to close by sharing with you one of the things that's been exciting for me to be at KSU is that there have been some areas on campus where we're trying to get pollinator habitat established, and we're working with Roundstone Seed, which is located in Upton, Kentucky. It's about an hour south of Elizabethtown. And they have this product that they're wanting to bring to the market. I don't think it has a formal name yet, but it's supposed to be available in 2026. I call it flower fabric. And it has flower seed embedded in it, and it also has fertilizer embedded in it. And I'm excited about it because some of the slopes around Kentucky State University are about 8 to 10%. And so we can use it on areas that maybe the flower seed would wash away if it were really heavy rain, and it also is attractive. It sends the message to the average person who may be walking by that this isn't an area that's being neglected. This is a project here, right? And just stick around, wait and see. You'll see some flowers here inevitably. So that's the other thing that I like about it. It's not on the market just yet. It should be on the market, I think, by February. I don't know the price of this. I don't know if it will be surely it will be in smaller sizes for people who don't have a university to put pollinator habitat, but it will disintegrate, right? I mean, I wanted you to see a picture of it here, and then this we put it down, and after maybe I'd say about a full month, it had already disintegrated. And then this was taken in July, right before I had to go to a conference and present. You just put it down and you stake it, and then you have to keep it wet, right? If it dries out, it may not be effective. Nope. Don't cover it with mulch or anything like that. You keep it wet. You may have, like I said, you may stake it. Otherwise, if it gets too dry, it'll blow away. It may not take. So that's what we're seeing on this one side. If you're familiar with Lexington at all, especially on New Circle Road, you know where the big water tower is, right? Kentucky American Water Tower. Columbia Gas maintains a pollinator habitat right under that big water tower on New Circle Road, and that's where this was tested. And then KSU, Kentucky State University campus, we've put in 2 installations, I think it was in October. And so, and I think we have a total of 5 places on campus that we're trying to do this. So you do have to still you have to get rid of those grasses on top. And the seed bank needs to be clean underneath too. Right? That it's the seeds in that seed bank that are your real threat, because they're just waiting. If you give them an opportunity where there is not a cool season grass on top of it, you will have trouble. So what we have done on KSU is just using herbicide. Yeah, we've used herbicides. I'm not a big fan of that, but it is because it's not practical to do a prescribed fire burn on a university campus in the middle of town. We're not doing that. So that's our other option, right? And I like to remind, I'm a board member of Project APISM, and there's some really good information. If you're looking for some other seed mixes, I never know, when people come to this conference, what their interest is, and when we say small farm, what that means. Is that 10 acres? Is it 100 acres? So I like to point people here to show some different types of mixes. These are my resources, and I mentioned, and I showed you some photos from Craig Burrows. He has an entire book, and it's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then if you're more interested in some of the nutritional aspects of what I was talking about, how a pollinator plot can contribute to the nutritional needs of a beehive, this came out in 2024. Both of these are 2024. They're very recent. And I mentioned a couple of times Josh Bartlett's, some quotes from his Pollen Landscape. I just love this book. I'm such a nerd about it. But I like to kind of remind people that this was written in Wales. But still, there's a lot of plants that you will find here in the States. But it's such a gorgeous book, and there are tons of pollen grains in there that will make you appreciate flowers in a whole new fashion. And there is my contact information. Here is a QR code that we would kindly ask for you to fill out again, just so that we are doing due diligence to the federal government that pays for a lot of our salaries. And if there are any questions, Miss Emma, do you want, am I good with questions? Are we good? 10 minutes? Any questions or comments? I forgot to say something in this presentation. Like I said, I never know who shows up here. But USDA has 2 federal programs that help landowners convert some of their lands into pollinator habitat, okay? And one is called the Conservation Reserve Program. And that is for people who have agricultural land that you've used for soybeans or corn or wheat or oats or something like that. And you decide, well, I want to take an off year or a couple of years, and you want to plant that in pollinator habitat. So CRP will help you do that. And that's what my family and I did on one farm, right? So you saw the pictures from this one farm. The other program is called the NRCS EQUIP program. And that is where you take farmland, oh, not farmland, but land that is marginal, right? It may not be suitable for planting corn or anything, but you could plant pollinator habitat in that. And that program is called EQUIP, Environmental Quality Incentive Program, I think. Now that the federal government has reopened, you could reach out to them. But what I want to tell you about, especially if you are what's called socially disadvantaged, limited resource, or a beginning farmer, right? It's CCC 860. And this needs to be your first step. There's a lot of different definitions of what's considered socially disadvantaged. If you are a woman, for instance, and you are trying to get your farm up and rolling, then you would be considered socially disadvantaged. If maybe you served your country and you come back and you're an amputee, then this would be a way for you to get some financial assistance, okay? This typically and ideally needs to be in place before you apply for the CRP or the NRCS EQUIP, right? So I have some extras here because I had to do a conference in Tennessee and I was talking about grants. So if you want to take these, feel free. These are extras. And again, I mean, one thing that's very helpful when you're dealing with pollinator habitat is to understand we're not talking about these little seed packets that are like $1.50 at Kroger's, right? We're talking invoices of $1,500, right? At the least, right? At the small end of the margin. So you need to think about making sure that seed bank is perfectly clean before you spend that money on your wildflower seed, okay? And that takes some time, which nobody in the United States like to spend, you know? It takes some prep, you know, and it takes working with people who are knowledgeable in these fields, you know, so that you take it easy on yourself, because it's a lot of sweat equity too. All right, any questions, comments?
What if you're not interested in really harvesting the honey, but yet would like just pollinator?
So the question is, what if you don't want to be a beekeeper, but you want pollinator habitat? Is that it? That's fine. Oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. And to make sure that I understand the question, do you want a local beekeeper to have hives on your land, or you just want flowers? You could care less about the bees. Okay. Sure. Okay, so there is on the Kentucky State Beekeepers Association website a list of 60 different beekeeping associations throughout the Commonwealth, at least 60. So you can find your local beekeeping association and reach out to them and see if somebody needs areas to put hives on. If it were me, because I'm neurotic, I would want a surface use agreement so that, you know, somebody is picking up the expenses to fence off those hives if you live in an area that has a lot of bears, right? Like, you don't want to deal with somebody who's the bears have come and knocked over all of the hives and they're angry, and I mean, you know, I would just get a surface use agreement in place. You know, and then, you know, maybe your take of it is a gallon of honey or something if they make that much. Second year, first year hives don't make that much, right? You don't take honey from first year hives. But the website for Kentucky State Beekeepers Association is kybees.org. And that is where that list is of all of the beekeeping associations in the state. But I agree. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I'm 57. I think I have about another 10 years of being a beekeeper, and we finally, it took us 3 years to get down from 300 hives to under 100. I mean, we're there. We get it. It's a lot of hard work to keep bees. Other questions or comments? Yes? Comments, questions? Yeah. I always like to remind people too, like maybe this is too big, right? You can always plant good, to me, enjoyable pollinator habitat in containers. Herbs are fabulous pollinator plants, and let them flower. So what herbs am I talking about? Mints, any type of mints, peppermint, spearmint, any type of mints. Rosemary, right? Thyme, right? Thyme is also... The oil in basil makes a great propolis, right? So what I like about that type of container gardening is that you can also use these things too, right? Yeah, they're great. They are so beneficial, and they're beneficial to humans, right? Sage is a perfect example of a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous plant that we use this time of year, right? We're getting ready to throw it into the dressing with our turkey stuffing. So, like I said, if you can't kind of wrap your head around all of the things that I'm talking about, and you're not going to go out and plant 252 million flowers just because Tammy said to, you can do it on a small scale with things that are useful to you. Container gardening is typically cheap and it's hardy. Herbs can handle heat, don't need a lot of fussing, and also provide you benefits as well. So just remember that. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for being here and sticking it out with us. Take some of this stuff home. You're welcome to come up and take any of this with you.
So our next presentation will start at 3, and it is actually, if you haven't heard this already, it is actually Sherry Dutton's presentation. So Jody Thompson will not be speaking at 3. It'll be Sherry Dutton's presentation about flowers for dyeing.